Well, one of the most outspoken, influential activists who helped spur the anti-GMO movement has changed his mind. Mark Linus says, in fact, GMOs are not a living pollution, nor will they turn what we eat into so-called frankenfood. The reason for his change of heart, he says, is science.
I want to apologise for having spent several years ripping up GM crops. I'm also sorry that I helped start the anti-GM movement back in the 90s, and that I thereby assisted in demonising an important technological option which can and should be used to benefit the environment.
As you might imagine, this is spurring several others who jumped on the anti-GMO train to stand their ground and breathe new life into a years-long debate about genetically modified foods. So we were curious to find out more about why such a prominent, outspoken critic of GMOs had changed his mind. So we have him here now. Mark Linus joins us from London. Hey there, Mark. This is a huge 180 here. Give me the nuts and bolts of your reasoning.
Well, basically, my change of heart comes from the fact that I've spent a long time studying the science on biotechnology, which was preceded by studying the science on climate change. So basically, I moved from being somebody who was only ever writing about environmental issues from an environmentalist perspective to somebody who is trying to study the science in order to be more effective in talking about climate change. And there's a very strong consensus on climate change, which comes from the scientific community. And when I discovered that there was the same sort of consensus in the scientific community that GMOs were safe, I basically had to reassess my views on that.
We spoke about your change of heart to Alexis Baden-Meyer with the Organic Consumers Association, and I want to play for you what she says and then have you respond.
There's no evidence that genetically modified food is safe to eat. In the United States, we don't safety test it. We consider it substantially equivalent, basically the same as normal food, and there are no safety tests done.
So you're saying there's no evidence that GMs are not safe. She's saying there's no evidence that it is safe. Talk a little bit about how we get past this, and if what you say is correct, show the people that it is in fact safe.
Well, what you're saying is actually not correct. There's been tens of millions of dollars worth of tests done and tested on every new product that reaches the market. In the EU, these tests are all done independently, and they're done by independent scientists, so that's simply not true. The point is, though, you can ask for evidence that something is safe, and it's very difficult to prove a negative. But the point is, if we can do all of the tests, and there's been tests done for many years on all the different GMO products which are on the market, there's never been any evidence of harm. So there comes a point where you just say, okay, fine, the jury's in. This food is not frankenfood. It's not scary. It was new 15 years ago, but now it's not new, and actually it's completely acceptable and completely safe.
I guess, Mark, what led you sort of all those years ago to make this such a huge issue? It was something that you really spoke out against and really became one of the godfathers of this movement. What is it that you saw or read that made you anti-GMs at first?
Well, you have to understand this is bound up with a whole load of cultural values stuff. So most of this debate tends to demonize some of these companies like Monsanto, for example. People are very obsessed with Monsanto being this kind of demonic presence on the corporate stage. And a lot of the anti-capitalist type protesters use the GMO thing as really part of the main battle against the big corporations. So a lot of this is very values-based stuff. The organic lobby, of course, is very anti-GMO because they believe it's unnatural. So there's a whole lot of stuff all wrapped up in here at a very deep-seated level, and it's not going to be easy to reframe that. But again, if you come at this from a scientific perspective and you look at the evidence, there really isn't any evidence at all that we've got anything to worry about. And in fact, these are potentially very useful technologies which we can use to help the environment, and that's something which has really changed my mind.
So what about those people, Mark, who worry that you've actually just arranged a behind-the-scenes deal with Monsanto, that they're paying you to be their new spokesperson? They're the all-powerful Monsanto. You can assure us that you haven't been paid off, right?
Yeah, I mean, my payment for giving that speech was they gave me a glass, one of those sort of things that you get when you're a speaker, and the chairman of the conference has given me a ram, which is a sheep, a male sheep, because he lives up the road and has a farm just up the road, and I keep sheep as well. But other than that, I've not heard anything from Monsanto or the biotechnology industry in general, and if they contacted me, I would tell them to go away. I'm not interested.
And I know, let's get into a little science here. I know this is confusing to a lot of people, but I know one of the things that you've said in the past is that GM is actually just another form of mutation breeding. But doesn't mutation breeding sort of bring about its own set of problems?
Well, what you're talking about is the technique of mutagenesis, which is inducing mutations in plants in order to get them to develop traits which you then find desirable. An example is that the wheat which is used in pasta, durum wheat, was bred through mutagenesis a long time ago, and it's something which has been accepted for a long time. But the point is that GM is actually much more precise, because you identify the genes that you want and you put them into the plant, and you check it very carefully for safety and so on and so forth. With mutagenesis and standard conventional plant breeding, which everyone accepts, including organic farmers, you basically mess up the whole genome and just see what happens, and there's no safety testing at all. So actually, I think you can make a strong case that GM foods are probably safer than their conventional counterparts.
Do you think that you're going to have quite a few people kind of following you in this new opinion? I mean, what have people's reaction been?
Well, it's been fascinating, actually. I was expecting bags full of hate mail, and there's been, I have to admit, there's been one or two, and the standard accusation that I've probably taken money from Monsanto. But I would say that's been outweighed 100 times by supportive tweets, emails, and just the number of times the thing's been downloaded. It's probably tracking about 140,000 times now in just a few days. And, that's a kind of viral internet phenomenon, which I had no idea. I just wrote a speech, and I gave the speech and put up a blog post. But, this has obviously struck a chord with a lot of people that are also realizing in a simultaneous way that there's simply nothing behind all these GMO fears, and it's time to get on with using the science properly.
Well, it certainly is an interesting debate that, as you say, it's been going on for years, still to no end. Appreciate you sharing your views. Mark Linus, environmental campaigner and author of The God Species.
Many thanks.